Welcome, Saturday morning. This is Candid Conversations. What we do on Candid Conversations, we get to talk about broadcasting. For now, we're doing this series with veteran broadcasters like you. We've done a couple, and the messages we've been getting, people are beginning to see that some people have passed through this job, this terrain, where many are actually treading now. So we welcome you, Mr. Phil Ushie. Welcome to Candid Conversations.
Thank you for having me. And yes, indeed, I was going to say that. You took that right out of my mouth. As I said before we came on air, the last time I saw you, I thought I was like that. But
like that.
no, see how big I am now. Let me start by a quick protest, which I had expressed only a few days ago. I don't consider myself a veteran. The very word makes one feel rather old. I'd rather say I'm a senior broadcaster, experienced broadcaster. I'm much more comfortable to be referred to as senior or experienced.
You're a veteran. We hear people who are just 5 years, 2 years in the profession call themselves veterans.
Well, the word, as I told Charles a few days ago, has lost its meaning. Unfortunately, media persons, journalists, broadcasters who are supposed to know better, as the very ones abusing the word. The origin of the word, as far as I remember, as far as I can make out, was the military. One was said to be veteran if one had seen many wars and survived and had retired and had reached a certain age. But as you said, people have been in the profession for a few years, 5 years, 7, and they consider themselves veterans. I think it's got to do with training or a lack of it. The way one was trained not so long ago was such that there was no way one could consider oneself veteran after just a few years. Training is the key thing, or rather, lack of training is the key thing that is wrong with broadcasting today. Training, lack of training and supervision. And it seems to me that there's only one station, a TV station, where I get the impression that there's a quality control person on board. I get the impression that you come in, you shape in or shape out.
Yeah, we'll come to that. Content, delivery, and all whatnot, as it has to do with the stations that we have to do. We want to hear your story. Could you tell us the very first day you started out as a broadcaster?
I'd say the very first day was training school.
Right.
It was mandatory at the time. Yes. It was mandatory. You couldn't go anywhere near a live microphone if you didn't have training. You went for training. At some point, it was 10 to 12 weeks. Then I think it eventually came down to about 8 weeks. But even 8 weeks, I don't think is good enough, although it would depend on the exposure of the candidates or applicants.
So how many weeks did you have, and who were your colleagues?
It was 10 weeks.
Okay.
My colleagues, late Zachary Mohammed, Shay Martins was on the same course. Jacob Akinyemi Johnson was on the same course. Late Tunde Balogun was on the same course. And it was Tunde Balogun, incidentally, who christened Radio Nigeria 2, the Sunshine Station. Many people don't know that.
Why did he think it was a Sunshine Station?
I never thought of asking Tunde, but he said it frequently, and it caught on after a while, and that was just it. Oh yes, there's I keep forgetting her marital name, and I hope she doesn't take offense, but she was Tinu Eshubi at the time, and whenever I think about her, I'm thinking of Tinu Eshubi without disrespect to her status. Well, a good number of others came from other states, and I don't remember their names now, but it would come. There's a chap who was from Radio Nigeria, Enugu. I can see him in my mind's eyes. I think he has a brother or cousin by the same surname who was in Cadbury's or something. I forget his name. Igbo chap. Oh dear.
Well, when that comes,
right.
Let's talk about it.
So as I was saying,
yeah.
you got into training school. You were drilled for 10 weeks or so. Then you got out of training school, and all you did was attend clinics and do what was called double banking, which was like internship with a more experienced broadcaster. The clinics were great help to help smoothen out the rough edges that were still there when after training school. When one was double banking, all one did was watch, observe, and after a while, grudgingly, you were allowed to give time check and do station identification. No more. And you did just that for quite a while.
Day.
Yes, all shifts, if you like. The idea was to let you understand or make you understand that this was serious business. And with time, one developed more and more confidence. So, based on the reports of supervising officer, one was then allowed to do more. There was what was called opening announcements for programs coming up. And then gradually, one was allowed to do what was called program parade, program promo. Program parade was first thing in the morning. There was no 24-hour broadcasting at the time. And on program parade, one was supposed to sell the programs that would be heard during the day, or at least the key programs.
Like connecting what was going to happen.
Yes, through the day.
So the listener knows exactly.
Yes, what's coming up, and stood by. Yeah. Program promo. Well, program is going to cover in another hour or two. So you told listeners about it. It was something one usually did when a program ended 2-3 minutes before the next before airtime for the next program. So one filled in by doing program promo or playing a piece of suitable music, and when the time was running out, one faded out. Today, broadcasters yank off music. Very offensive. Very offensive. How could you do that?
In your time.
It could cause a suspension or very serious reprimand. So eventually then one was allowed to do news summary. But most of what one did during the internship period were recorded programs. Because they were recorded under supervision of a more experienced presenter or producer. So you did what you were told. And then with time, all right, he's loosening up or she's loosening up. I think we can let him go on air live. And news summary was something like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes on the outside. And that was what one did for quite a while. And
do you remember the person you double banked as you started?
Sydney Ofeli, late Gabriel Otaru, Veronica, again late Veronica Osawere, Charles Onyegbule, whom I believe is back in the country now.
I think he's on Arise.
Arise, yes. I've heard the voice. And the first time I heard the voice, even without looking, I said, that has to be Charles. But before Arise, there was some other station abroad, I think. And again, as soon as I heard the voice, I thought, that has to be Charles.
So those were the people you double banked. What memories or what do you remember while you double banked with the likes of Sydney Ofeli?
Well, broadcasting was jolly good family, not family in the sense of what some politicians declare themselves today, but one was embraced. But before training school, by the way, one did what was called audition, and following audition, the auditioning officer did a report. And at the end of the report, one was declared okay, not okay, but trainable, not okay, may not be trainable.
So you write someone off like that the person is not trainable?
Not exactly. Okay. If one seemed to, if not okay, not trainable, may not be trainable, seemed...
You've killed my career.
No, seemed to have something. That candidate was encouraged to come back for another audition 6 months later or something, and then given some assignments that would help. And some of them did come back and turned out to be better than the okays. It's a matter of zeal. When I auditioned would-be broadcasters, the best person at audition may not necessarily be the person I would recommend or fight for. I also took a look at the candidate's zeal, the candidate's hunger for the job. They turn out to be much better than those who did best at auditions.
So it's not always about that very first audition.
No.
You might not make it that first.
No, you might not, but if you want it, you'll work at it.
Yeah.
Those who were considered okay or not okay but trainable would generally be considered for engagement depending on the number of vacancies available.
Now that you've talked about auditions, maybe we'll quickly brush through this. Tell us what it is. How do you think it affects people when there are intrusions, when they have accents? How much does it affect someone's ability to do well on the job?
Well, when you say accent, first of all, things have changed considerably. Anyone who had any kind of what you might call regional accent had a tough time getting engaged.
But we're Nigerians.
Yes, we're Nigerians broadcasting to the universal world. But today things have changed, and so even on the BBC and CNN, which are frontliners today, when an Asian correspondent or reporter was giving a report, when an East European correspondent or reporter was giving a report, or an East African reporter or correspondent, South African or Southern African correspondent or reporter, Arab correspondent or reporter, you could tell where they came from, but their phonetics is correct. as long as phonetics is correct,
You mouth the words
yeah,
correctly.
yeah, it's okay these days. It just tells where you come from. It just tells where you come from. And with time, almost anyone can overcome regional accent. Someone quarreled with struggle for accent and diction on the broadcaster's platform a week or two ago. And I felt sorry for the young lady in question, who I think we all know, because some of us are on that platform. But my attitude to it is that the gentleman's complaint arose, or the problem arose, because of lack of training and or continual supervision. Continual supervision is a critical thing in broadcasting. I mean, in my time, everyone, whatever one's level, one knew that one was being monitored. And the person who picks you up on something you did or said wrong may well be a greenhorn, someone just fresh from training school. So one was always on one's toes. And talking about continual training and supervision, there was what was once called presentation meetings.
Different from the clinics?
Yes, presentation meeting was a forum for everyone, whatever one's level. And at presentation meetings, it was compulsory. The only ones who were excused were those who were on duty, live, duty continuity announcer, or someone standing by to take a major news broadcast or something. Presentation meeting was compulsory for all announcers. People are happy to be called presenters these days. In those days, if anyone called me a presenter, I would be very angry.
So what if you were called OAP?
Oh, damn, that's even worse.
Why?
Listen,
OAP.
Not every OAP or presenter is a broadcaster. Not every OAP is, to use the proper parlance, an announcer. An announcer, which for me is the proper term, is someone who has gone through a certain process of training. OAP.
From what you hear today,
if a doctor has a health program, a health talk program on air, that makes him an OAP. Not a broadcaster, not an announcer. If someone is a specialist in cinematography and is engaged by a station to come and talk about the basic rudiments of cinematography, that person is at best a presenter. Do you understand? If a hairdresser comes talking about hairdressing and beauty care,
so you're presenting what it is you do to the people.
Yes. Yeah, that's just it.
All right, we'll go to all of that, because we're going to look at commonly mispronounced words, commonly misused terms, and all of that. We'll talk about that if time permits us. But I want us to go straight into Phil Ushie and the program you presented, or the program that you provided content for while you were on air. I'm casting our minds back now to Martin Street. What do you remember?
On Martin Street, one did almost everything. So one had to be multi-talented, properly expressed. So one ran a 6-hour beat, during which most, or at least the key live programs, were presented by duty continuity announcer, abbreviated DCA, or some people later came up with a word like oh dear, it's an expression I never liked.
So maybe that's why you don't remember it.
Yeah, DM, disc motivator. Oh. And I thought, my goodness, such expressions make you a glorified DJ.
What's wrong with being a DJ?
Nothing. But again, a DJ is not necessarily a broadcaster. A DJ is one.
That's what they are called in some parts of the world.
No, not on a. They talk about radio DJs.
Okay.
And a radio DJ would be one who just presents music.
Okay.
He need not have a special training. Meaning that this guy knows music, and that's it. So, or this lady knows music. I have never felt comfortable with referring to a lady as a guy because it was not like that in my time. Yeah, when I was growing up, I mean, the guy was male person. With a particular leaning.
So would it be wrong for the young ones today to say that with some of the things you've talked about and some of the things your colleagues have expressed and some of your seniors, would it be right for these young ones to say these folks were actually in a straight jacket? You did it like this, you had to do it this way, you had to do that and that and that.
If I'm referred to because of my attitude to the profession as straight-jacketed, I would not be ashamed. Every profession has its norms, its protocol. You walk into a bank, you know who the banker is, you know who the customers are because of the way they are dressed. And I'm going to come to the issue of dressing. When I see certain things on TV today, dress modes and dress forms, I think there's been a derailment.
Okay, I'll pick you on that because I have some colleagues who work for for TV and they are here on Facebook because this is going on live. Let's talk about your program, the ones you presented while you were on air.
There was, first of all, I did news, and I love doing news.
You still love it?
I still love it. I do news any day.
Okay.
And talking about news, what I hear these days can hardly be described as news presentation.
I hope you've never smashed a radio set.
No, I've been close to it. I've come close to it. The key feature and character of news presentation is attack.
Okay.
Over time, even on the BBC, attack has come down one or two notes. But it has to have the attack feature for it to be news. Otherwise, it could be anything else but news.
Okay.
I love news presentation. News presentation has this elegance. Even if you couldn't see the presenter as on radio. Do you understand? It has this culture that is unmistakable. Do you understand? The other programs I did largely as matters of duty, and I always told people.
Do you remember what?
Yeah, there was Dawn Show,
okay,
which was an early morning program to begin the day. Yeah, but on the Dawn Show, a smart presenter would not go bang 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 from 5:30 a.m. or so when the program began. One tried to ease one's listeners into the day. I mean, imagine just waking up in the morning and someone is bang bang banging at your head. It could be offensive. It could be offensive, and I hear a lot of that these days. I mean, at 5 a.m., at 6 a.m., you're bang bang banging. That's sad.
That's sad. And you're the boss who's
sad.
Listening. You will definitely answer to that.
Yes, because you should ease the listener into the day. So things that are mellow and mid-tempo for a while And then when you feel that, hey, people ought to have woken up, people ought to have hit the road, people ought to be more active, then you gradually stepped up. Do you understand? If it was an afternoon show, there was what was called Homeward Bound. Homeward Bound began by 3:30 because civil servants at that time knocked off work by 3. It gradually crept up to 4 o'clock, I believe, but Homeward Bound ran till 5 o'clock. And then there was something else that followed, and by 6 o'clock you were done. If you were rostered to take the news at 6, you took the news at 6. Otherwise, the incoming DCA usually, or rostered news presenter, took the news at 6, and your beat was done, provided, and I have said that 3 times, provided your relief has come.
How did you know that's what I was thinking? I was going to throw that at you. Did you ever walk out of the studio before your relief?
It was harakiri. It was murder.
If you did that,
Walk away from the station for whatever reason. No. Even now, I still consider it unimaginable. Towards the tail end of my service on Martin Street, a few persons did that, and I didn't know how they could find the courage to do that. It was gross irresponsibility. Leave your station unmanned? For who? Okay, yes, there's some.
But I know you're coming. You're coming to take over.
How do you know I'm coming? How do you know I'm coming? How do you know even if I have called to say, hey, look, I'm held up in traffic or something has just happened, there's just been a sudden emergency, how do you know I would get there in one piece or well enough to take over? Do you understand? I mean, I have run 2.5 shifts. It was 3 shifts those days because I came for a morning beat and my relief did not come for whatever reason. Phones were not as easily available as they are today. And the gentleman or lady who was supposed to relieve the afternoon beat
didn't show up
or came in late. So one found oneself at the station from 4:35 a.m. to 8 p.m., 9 p.m. or something. You had to do it. It's your job. It's your job until someone else came. At some point in Broadcasting House, Ikoyi, most of the times there was a call officer, usually senior announcer. These days, I think the position has been rebranded senior presentation officer or something. That's an expression I find rather offensive, but be that what it may. I like to hear senior announcer, principal announcer, and then yes, it shows that, look, this person has gone through the mills, and so on especially weekends. There was always a senior officer you could call and say, after an hour or so, my relief has not come. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's wrong. And he or she would step in. I used to have this very mischievous colleague. God rest her soul. She's passed on now, but jolly good fellow. I did a morning duty in Ikoyi, and she was supposed to come and relieve me by 12. Well, ideally 11:30, because 11:30, 12, one spent going through takeover formalities or takeover and handover formalities. So 12 o'clock she wasn't there. 12:30 she wasn't there. 1 o'clock 1:30. So I walked over to principal announcer's office, and I said to her, this lady has not come. Of course, I used her name, and I said, I don't know what the problem is. Okay, Phil, I'll come and take over shortly. Please give me 20 minutes or so to be done with.
The supervisor had to pacify you to say, I'll come take over.
Yes. It was standard practice.
Yes.
It was standard practice. And this day, by about, interestingly, she had some other engagement or commitment for later that day. Lo and behold, my relief came in very gaily dressed, really? About 2:33, and announced she was ill. You could tell she was going to a party, but she didn't care what you thought. And she has come, she has reported.
To tell you she was ill.
Yes. So she made a U-turn. The car that brought her made a U-turn.
So what did you do?
And they took off. So by this time, it was actually poor Roslyn, who was principal announcer at the time, chief what's the expression? Chief quality control officer. That's how I like to describe the position. She almost cried because she had obviously made a commitment somewhere. Oh, don't worry, as soon as I'm done with blah, 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 I'll be with you whenever. That was my assumption. But the lady had reported she was ill, and that was it. In broadcasting house at the time, on home service at the time, that's what the station was called, the station tried not to stretch, especially morning beat duty continuity announcer for too long, because of diminishing returns, and for good reason. And these days, when I hear a presenter on for too long, I'm concerned. I think there's something wrong with the scheduling or rostering. I guess private stations are trying to save costs.
Yes, I would also like that you comment on that. Private radio, private TV, what they can actually do to get it better. Can you recollect the year that you joined broadcasting?
I went for audition. Honestly and sincerely, no. It was actually an accident. I was in medical school, and some of my classmates,
you were going to be a doctor.
some of my classmates and colleagues in School of Nursing, which was on the same premises, till this day, still have not forgiven me, because they didn't know exactly what happened. Broadcasting was just supposed to be a stopgap while I prepared myself to go abroad and continued.
And you fell in love with it?
Yeah, broadcasting is an opium. It's an opium. Until several years into my broadcasting career, I had my childhood friends who continued to call me doctor, because they believed that sooner or later I would go and wrap up.
What year did you join broadcasting?
I did audition in 78. I don't remember exactly when anymore.
Okay.
And then went to training school eventually, January 79. Training school had started, I think I lost like 2 weeks. Some politics happened. Roslyn had auditioned me. And at some point I had what's that expression? What's this animal that has a long neck? I had kangarooed over her and seen her report. And I thought, oh, this was good. Because when I first came in, I wanted a part-time thing. There was an announcement. And the qualification was clearly, our requirement was clearly spelled out. And I thought, well, I qualified. So I went in. Jide Adekusibe, God bless his soul, God rest his soul, jolly good fellow. He was on duty. I think he was senior announcer or principal announcer at the time. And he welcomed me very nicely. I told him I just wanted some part-time stuff. And he said, sorry, this job or the vacancy is available. We're not for part-time anything. So in my mind, I said to myself, well, I was honest to you. I told you what I wanted. But if you say you want me full-time, good. If I took off 1 month later, that's your problem, not mine. Anyway, then the audition was done, and as I said, I thought, well, I stood a good chance. And then lo and behold, the days and the weeks passed. No word came, and I thought, all right, go find out what happened. And I was passed back and forth from one person to another. And I said to myself, my goodness, this lady who didn't know me from Adam couldn't have done such a good report. And then...
you still haven't called me.
Yeah, precisely. So eventually, I ran into late Martin Zoko. Oh, jolly good fellow. Jolly good fellow. Martin Zoko was one of the finest broadcasters there ever was. Finest news presenters there ever was. Martin Zoko had skills and gifts that used to amaze me. As continuity announcer, when Martin Zoko came into the studio at news time, he threw you out. Obviously, he wanted to be absolutely alone. Yes, but on Voice of Nigeria, most of the times he didn't have that privilege because there were other things duty continuity announcer had to do. So, but he had this great gift and skill apart from being an excellent news presenter. Martin Zoko is reading the first line or two or third line, and he's making corrections on the 7th line, on the 10th line.
He must be
Yeah.
genius.
Yes. News, as usual, came just before airtime because of poor facilities. In any case, news was always coming in, and there were times when you were given just the first few stories, and news editor would tell you, well, look, listen, just go ahead, I'll bring the rest of it later. And either that it was brought to you in the studio, especially if you were a continuity announcer, also doubling as news presenter. But if you were just rostered on the news, it was a responsible thing, knowing how things functioned, to go to a newsroom and sit with them and take the stories as they worked on them. Some editors would rather just be given time to at least do a few stories. But be that what it may, Martin's, you know that he just practically wrestled the news bulletin from news editor, and he gets in there, settles himself in, and starts news presentation. And as I said, he's doing line 1 or line 2, and he's making corrections on line 7 or line 10. I don't know how he ever got to do that. But later, with experience, it occurred to me that before you picked up the news script, that page, you could actually, especially if you knew you were sight reading, meaning that you had no time to prepare for this bulletin. You took that story, you took every story, did a quick scanning. Your eyes are bound to catch something that may not be right.
Can every broadcaster be a news reader? Is it possible?
With training, a good number, but news reading, news presentation has a style that I'm not so sure everyone can be. Some people, some presenters, some trained presenters, are better with easy flowing kind of programs. They are better with magazines. They are better with documentaries, presenting documentaries. They are better with presenting features programs. Some are very good at just doing continuity. Yeah. I love continuity work too, because running continuity also shows the quality of your training, because you never knew what to expect, and you were trained to listen attentively to every program on your beat. Those programs not presented by you, whether they were recorded or presented live. And in your logging, which I doubt if they still do these days, you reported faithfully what's transpired. Every program. Yes. You appraised the program, quality of production, quality of presentation, quality of delivery, and general creativity or lack of it. And we were told from training school that when you were logging, you are not logging IFI, you're logging the program. So that at the end of the day, the log went first to head of presentation. Head of presentation in those days was initially senior announcer, later became principal announcer, later became controller presentation. But be that what it may, the log went first to head of presentation. And these days, later first to the lowest presentation head. He or she would look through it, minutes on it, then send it to the next higher level. And that report went to eventually to controller programs, to manager programs, and all the way. Sometimes that log report went all the way to the director general. Well, when it got to that level, or got even to the level of zonal director, these days I think it's called executive director. When it got to that level, it meant that something serious had happened, because usually the director himself would call for the log
to know what transpired.
Yes, and
who was your director general while you were?
George Bako, Dr. Reverend, very Reverend George Bako. Dr. Christopher Collade had just moved on to Cadbury's when I came in, and I didn't meet him on the job, but everyone talked about him. Everyone talked about him. He talked about him on the job, talked about him as manager. Damn bloody good manager. Courageous manager. Something went wrong at some point in the military era. And when the military chaps came to pick up duty announcer and producer and whoever else was directly concerned with the program, word got to him and he came down and says, "Hey gentlemen, I am director general of this station, so whatever the problem is, take me, I'm responsible." Oh, that was yes. And so he grew to earn the respect of everyone. You had to respect him. But you hear Christopher Collade today talk after so many years out of active broadcasting or active service. You know that's a broadcaster.
Now that you've talked about that, quite a number of persons have sent him messages. Let me look at this. Don Pedro Koje, you remember him?
Yes.
He's saying, if you give him my regards after this bit. So they're watching. Chris Kende says, "Oh, Phil Ushie of RN245 Martin Street. Everybody remember you from there." Many have also, applauded the way you talk and the way you're presenting the issues here. What is responsible for still having it and keeping it till this time?
Well, I suppose first of all, we were trained to be ourselves. We were trained to be ourselves. When I first got in, I had friends I would talk with, and they would say, come. We're not on radio with you. But, you know, I didn't know that it gradually crept up on me. But eventually it occurred to me that I hardly even knew how to talk whatever other way.
So this is you. I wake you up
Yes.
in the morning.
This is me. Although, when I'm confronted with someone whose level of exposure is way down there, and I find that talking this way, I don't know how it happens, but reflexly, and that's what communication is. I just drop.
Person's level,
Yes,
so the person
yes,
is able to understand
yes.
what
If he's able to follow and doesn't feel that putting him or her down, or doesn't begin to feel, well, who's this?
feeling like?
Yeah, and I can come down to pidgin without fear or favor, without trouble, in a pidgin accent. And when I talk about pidgin is pidgin. A lot of what I hear on radio, on TV today, in broadcasting today, is not pidgin. It is everything but pidgin. Pidgin is not mangling or messing up English a bit. Pidgin is its own unique language, mode of communication. When I was growing up, I noticed that the pidgin spoken by Cameroonians was different from the pidgin spoken by Nigerians. The pidgin spoken in Sierra Leone is very different from the pidgin spoken in Nigeria. There's some similarity between pidgin spoken in Sierra Leone and pidgin spoken in Cameroon. Strong similarity. And if Sierra Leoneans and Cameroonians and Liberians have held on to their pidgin, what happened to us?
What do you think happened to ours?
I think we're gradually, sadly, we're gradually losing culture in all kinds of ways. We think that speaking in pidgin is demeaning, brings us down. That's not it. That's not it. There are bodies I'd rather speak pidgin to. And, you know, pidgin has no gender. Someone is referring to you today and saying, she can't do that. Well, what's that? Pidgin has no plural as such. But you express plural in how you say it. It's in plenty.
We will still talk about that.
So,
let's look at some of the things that you remember while on the job. Were you ever reprimanded? Were there words that you mispronounced? Would you like to share some of them with us?
One made constant effort. Presentation meetings, weekly presentation meetings, made sure that one was always on one's toes, and everyone was keeping an eye on everyone. Meaning that when you were on air, you were conscious that everyone was listening. Your seniors, people at the same relative level, and even your juniors. As I said earlier, the one who picks you up on what you said right or said wrong could very well be someone much, yeah. But you took the correction in good faith.
So which of the mistakes do you remember? Did you ever get a query?
No, not query for saying something wrong on the air. Certainly not. But I remember there was this day, quite a few years into my, well, no, not so many years into my broadcasting career. I had just done an afternoon beat, I think. Yes, it was an afternoon beat, and I finished off with the news at 6. And from that point, at that time, traffic used to be horrible. So I'd rather go to the tennis club. Tennis club was somewhere on 2nd Avenue in Ikoyi. By the time you've played some tennis and or had some beer, you were ready to hit the road. 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, the roads were free. So as I walked in, there was late Ernest Okonkwo, jolly good fellow. And he said, "Phil, what did you make of this word?" And he spelt it. Grandprix. I remembered that I had a problem with that word. It was a new word. I had never seen it. Not being tennis follower at that level, I'd never heard the word. So, and as I was struggling to no, but he said, "What did you make of it?" I was trying to figure out what I actually said, but eventually I remembered that I had pronounced as spelt. Pronounce it the way one would have said it in English. It occurred to me that it was the origin of the expression was definitely not English. So he then smiled and said, "Grand Prix," and you Grand Prixed it. So I thanked him very much, and he actually bought me a beer. Yeah, and then now you can sit down and have a beer on me. That was the way broadcasting functioned.
So you were learning wherever you were.
Yes, wherever you were, even in the marketplace. I mean, if Stella Awani caught you in a marketplace, in a supermarket, wherever, she picked on you on something you had done wrong or said wrong, and nobody took offense. No one took offense. You just couldn't take offense. It was the culture.
And you had to learn.
Yes, you wanted to be your best anyway, because anything short of your best was not acceptable. At presentation meetings, a few people tried to give excuse for what they did wrong. And someone said something. I said, I heard it on the BBC, trying to justify what he had done or said. And Ike Nandaguba said to him, "Do you know that even on the BBC, or some of those people you hear on the BBC are people on the same relative level with you?" Meaning, not everything you hear on the BBC might be right. So be careful. Be careful.
Very be careful. All right, let's now look at what you hear and see today. What is your assessment, your thorough assessment of what you hear on radio? Let's start with radio.
Generally,
yes,
I'd say it's very sad. I get general impression that the presenters, which is what most of them are, they are not announcers. As I said at the beginning, if you referred to me as presenter in those days, I'd be very offended. If you referred to any trained person as presenter in those days, he'd be very offended. Because you have put him or her down there.
But things are changing.
I don't know about change.
This is a digital.
Listen. An engineer is an engineer is an engineer. A technologist is a technologist. A technician is a technician. They are at different levels. They are at different levels of training. They have different levels of training. So, I think the thing with us is that we borrow expressions from foreign stations that we don't quite understand. I was talking with Sidney Otheli a week or two ago, and I said, there's an expression that is commonly used today, talk show. And I say, what's a talk show?
A talk show is a talk show.
Listen, it's either news or talk program or magazine program or features program or documentary
you had to describe it properly.
Be clear about what you're talking about. And most of the times when they're referring to talk show, because what's her name? I think the first time I heard the expression was on CNN. What's her name? She's no longer on CNN. She's been private broadcaster for quite a while. She used to be very big, but she's quite slim now. Usually they're referring to audience participation programs, discussion programs. And a discussion program is a talk program. Just like a debate falls into the talk program category.
Yeah.
So be clear about what you're talking
So clarity
about.
is important.
Yes. So we're all very confused here. Do you understand? People are just, and for magazines, there are different kinds of magazine programs. There could be music magazine, there could be news magazine, and over time, well, I've noticed that the difference between what used to be news, or the line between what used to be news and programs, is gradually thinning out and is almost non-existent. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Meaning that on every station there was news division and there was programs division. But over time, it's
the gaps are closing.
Yeah, the gaps are closing. And so, what kind of program are you doing, even for news?
So with the content, the things you hear, what you see, what do you make of it? How rich is it?
Content is becoming endangered species because of preparation or lack of preparation or poor quality preparation. There's a laziness going on in broadcasting today. Many broadcasters, many presenters have sadly handed over to listeners, contributing listeners, and I'm referring in particular to phone-in shows. A presenter ought to take his listeners at least halfway through the program, define the subject, define the flow, define what's going to be discussed, then call for contributions. As good old Jones would say, suppose there are no callers. Suppose there are no callers. What happens? The program fails? A program is a program is a program. You are a presenter of the program. You simply give people a chance. When Larry King used to be on CNN, he took the interview more than halfway before he called for participation and contribution by callers, by listeners. Today, a program begins and they have just barely launched or introduced the program and they throw the lines open. You have nothing to offer. You have nothing to offer. You have nothing to offer. If I was running a station and a presenter did that, well, he'd first get a warning, stern warning. If it happened again, well.
So what are some words that you'd like for us to pay attention to listening to radio and watching television? Of course, you and I just talked about several times before we came on air.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that so that others can actually learn.
My understanding of several times is that something has happened several times.
Not once, not one.
An incident a person personally observes or experienced. Severally would refer to multiple experiences more than once. That's my understanding.
So it has to be contextual.
Maybe I should actually check the dictionary meaning to be sure. But because again, my attitude to it is that we are always learning. There are words like rehabilitation, which over time seems to have changed meaning. Up till some point in the 70s and 80s, it was clearly rehabilitation. The H was silent. And rehabilitation was a word that was frequently used at the time because the war had just ended, and I think it was 3 R's, reconciliation, rehabilitation, and something. I don't remember the third R. But so rehabilitation was a word frequently used. And of course, it's becoming common today because of God knows how many centers, destitute centers one has today. But I think it was not TVC at the time. It was, I'm trying to remember the name of the station. You know, it's gone through like 2 stages of changes of name. I think it was at the 2nd stage of change of name when someone said rehabilitation, and said no rehabilitation, and he went to his laptop, and the laptop presented rehabilitation, and I said, well,
The H sounding really good.
yeah. But I just said to myself, I wasn't sure I could bring myself to say rehabilitation. And rehabilitation is not wrong.
Just like you have
There are other words I have a problem with. Not that they are entirely exactly wrong expressions, because over time, some relaxation seems to have happened. The word stadium, for instance. Having a Latin background, I studied Latin in secondary school. Stadium has its origin in Latin, and the plural of stadium would be stadia. But today, even the BBC says stadiums.
like forums.
Yes, I like forums, and I would never say forums. I would never say
Even if you found
stadiums.
it on the news.
No, I would. We were also taught to cite correct.
Okay.
Knowing that,
What if it's the house style?
well, house style is house style is house style.
Yeah.
House style is house style is house style. I guess if that happened and I'm on a station that would house style stadiums, I would struggle to say stadiums, but I would feel very uncomfortable there. Then football or sports teams, today you hear something like Nigeria are, Italy are advancing towards, a football team was one.
It's just one.
Yes, and so,
Nigeria is.
yes,
Italy is.
yes, and that's the way it was said in those days, but things have changed, and believe me, I would not say Nigeria are advancing
So
if
what-
I were sports commentator.
What do you
reporting
make of,
live.
What do you make of 080 or 080?
There was a fight, or near fight, on the broadcaster's platform, and my attitude to it, until death does me part, is 080.
080,
Yeah, 080.
like the 007.
Yes. The reason, as we were taught in training school, is that 0 or not signifies or implies nothingness. Nothingness.
Yes.
And your phone number is a number. Is a number.
So it's something.
Yes, you're not counting. You're not counting. And so you're giving 11 digits as they come. So, unfortunately, many of us seem to be I don't know what gallery we're playing up to. Somehow, 080 or 070 or 0 whatever 0 has become popular, but not right. It became popular because lots of phone users are not professionals. They're not trained people.
So as broadcasters, you should.
Yes, the motto of FRCN still is. I'm trying to remember how I'm trying to say it, but it's something like you're supposed to educate and uplift.
Uplifting the people, uniting the nation.
Yeah, I was mixing it up with our motto on the station.
Well, your job as
educate the people. Inform and educate. The two must go together. But regarding diction, if you fear that the correct pronunciation, because of your audience, may lead to misunderstanding that you're not going to be in a position to correct, then what it appears they would understand.
Okay. But for you, it is 080.
080.
Right.
And on the DJ, it's 080. On a good dictionary, it's 080.
All right, let's take a look at how did we get here.
Yeah. Now I'm going to have to wear my glasses, which is what I don't like doing.
Yeah.
The reason is quite simply that I don't like additions or impositions.
But you have to read with it.
Yeah, even though this is actually bifocal, which means that I can wear it even when I'm not. I just don't like it.
Well, I've worn mine since I was 3, so I'm just.
Well, quite frankly, I don't know that I would envy you. If there was something I could do not to wear it, I would.
Okay, so I came up with that, about 25 mistakes that radio presenters must avoid. If you take a look at page...
yes, page 6 would be, let's see now, we are here, yeah.
Let's just digest that.
So, there are 15 items here. Oh, no, 25. So,
I'm famous. Many of them think...
well, a lot of us tend to mix up fame or famous with popular. It's a misunderstanding. A person could be famous for the wrong things. A person who is popular, the word popular means that the person or the subject is both well known and liked or loved. Fame is just what it is, well known, not necessarily for the right reasons. A person could be famous for the wrong reasons. Hitler was famous, very famous. It's still a very well known name today. He was not and is still not exactly popular today.
If you look at the other ones,
I'm a brand. Well, yeah. If one stays on the job for long enough and does it right, I suppose one could become a brand. And there are personalities whose names became a brand. My very senior friend, late Ted Mokoro, became a brand. He was Uncle Ted to everyone. Uncle Ted even to persons who could have been his grandchildren. Because somehow Uncle Ted had become a brand. So if one stayed on the job long enough and did it right, did it creditably, one could become a brand. one's name could become a brand. That could happen. I know everything that's stupid. Plain stupid. Plain stupid. I can't think of any other word. And it arises from foolish pride. It arises from foolish pride. A person who thinks he knows everything has reached a point he refuses to be open. And a broadcaster must be continually open. Indeed, anyone who is smart in whatever sphere of life, in whatever area of life's endeavor, must be open. Must be open. In those days, we used to be told that you could get an idea from the studio attendant. The studio attendant was generally someone you sent on errands who cleaned up the studio and all that and all that. You could get an idea from any one of your colleagues who are not, okay, in this sense it's allowed, who are not on-air personalities. But to think that you know it all just because you're the one that goes on air is just stupid. I remember that SMs, especially at the initial stages, and even much later, taught me a lot of things. News editors taught me a lot of things. I feel, don't you think? Yes, if it makes sense, yes, thanks. In news presentation, I said this to Dele on his last trip, and I said, news editor knows that you received news bulletin just before airtime, no time to rehearse, and you managed to deliver the bulletin well. And as you're wrapping off, because he had come into the studio to pick up the bulletin, he gave you a thumbs up, and he hung around, and as soon as he got a chance, he asked you when you were knocking off, and he would, if you are going to free, say at the same time with him, knocking off about the same time with him, oh, can we meet at Studio 6? Studio 6, you know what that is. Yeah. And so you went out there and continued the off-air production. He was expressing appreciation for how you had managed his job. I mean, you had made his effort worthwhile. Yeah. Do you understand? I mean, and God help you if you had done it badly. The look he gave you could kill you.
What do you think about the reading culture of young broadcasters today? Do you think a book like this will make? There's a general laziness in reading, not just broadcasters. It's a young people or young person's thing, and even with spoken word. With English, texting has had a lot of impact and effect, not just on spoken word, but on spellings. The advent of phones, readily available phones, easily available phones, has made it has had its huge impact on reading. So young people prefer to just go online, a lot of the times reading nonsense. And today people would even read the Bible on their phones, and it's not the same. It's not the same. And the power, believe you me, the power that comes from Bible reading is like, let me be generous, 98%
proper hard copy Bible. I mean, I would only read the Bible on the phone, maybe if I weren't home, something came up in a discussion and we needed to clear it by referring to the Bible. Otherwise, I'd rather pick up the book. Yeah.
All right, so as we wind down, what's going on? What are you doing? Are you into trainings? Are you open to training young ones who want to learn the tricks of the trade?
I would like to. I tried to do that with a few stations. So far, it hasn't been very successful.
Wow.
The reason I believe is, first of all, the ownerships are either ignorant or don't care, as long as they are making their money. The other factor, which is sad, is that some hustler who had the right contact at the initial stages heard that so and so, the starting radio station, gets introduced and is given a position he has no business holding. And so he doesn't know any better. And so you meet him, and as a colleague, you walk up to him, introduce, I know you now. I know you now. I feel I know you. And then you get talking about your mission, and you suggest a training session, even a 2-week workshop on fine points of presentation. Okay, I'll see what I can do. Let me talk with my guy.
And it ends there.
That's it. At some point, I was in my state capital, and I tried to do it, but because I was not happy with what I heard on air. I pulled a few strings, tried all my contacts. I won't tell you the year so that no one who is watching or listening to this, but my friends and contacts introduced me to GM of the station, which was the highest position at the time, introduced me to PERMSEC, Ministry of Information. That ministry is directly supervisory over the state's broadcasting stations. And I got close to the governor at some point, because I thought only the governor could handle this. It occurred to me at some point that they were just dodging. They were just dodging. And one of those who was trying to fix it said to me, "Look, Phil, you know what's going on?" He had just retired as PERMSEC. And he said to me, "You know, if this proposal worked, they may be out of job. They were afraid that they may be out of job, that the governor could say to himself, if there was someone who could do this, why am I keeping so and so?" But that wasn't my attitude. My attitude was, hey, look, you're GM or DG. I could simply, working with you, help your staff do it better. And the way I saw it then was that DG or PERMSEC would get credit for it, because unless someone asked, it may never be known that Phil Ushie did the job. I have not given up. But the bottom line is that most station owners are either ignorant, do not care, or both. Or they first employ someone as head who has no business holding headship position.
Speak now, for some people who are watching, are you open to it, just in case people want to reach you and say, look, we would like you to come train our personnel, we want you to come train our continuity announcers, or our
Sure, I'd like to. teaching, passing on, has been a great love and passion. And not every experienced person, not everyone who knows how to do it, not everyone who is good on the job can train, by the way. Training is something that comes with one natural skill. No, I mean, as I told someone once, not everyone who is skilled can pass on skill. Because some do not have the skill to pass on. They do not have the gift. Some do not have the desire. They're afraid of passing it on. That's a shame.
So, is it possible that we're going to read from you someday? Are you writing a book? Are you putting things together? Because these things that we talked about and more will go with you.
My dear friend,
you have to write something.
I keep thinking about it, but that's one area I'm lazy about. My dear friend and brother, Ojo, pushed me last year when we went for his, or rather, our uncle's funeral, yes. Willie Odiawa, Wilson Odiawa. And at some point, we actually slept in the same room, but we're that close. And of course, it's difficult or near impossible for broadcasters of that era to meet and not discuss the pains of the industry. Yes. So we talked about it. Phil, why don't you do something about writing? I don't know. I'll get started somehow or other.
You don't have to write it yourself. You could there are people who will sit.
I know. When I manage to write, I do write well. It's just a laziness, and maybe I need more people to push me. A childhood friend who has been living in the US for close to 50 years, read something I had written about a friend and secondary school classmate and brother. His cousin calls him my friend brother. Because we're that close. He passed on almost 2 years ago. And when I did my tribute, it was, I sent this childhood friend a copy. He just said to me, "Did you know you were a damn bloody good writer?" I said, "Well, I try." "You're going to do my biography?" I said, "Don't count on it. Don't count on it." Because it may never come. No, I mean, I have the skill, even if I say so myself. But bringing myself to do it.
Well, promise us that you're going to bring yourself to do it. Start writing.
Okay,
something.
I can promise to try.
Yes.
Now that I'm on air, very sad, very sad, very sad, very sad, very sad.
You have the experience that the
very
young
sad.
ones. You're like a fountain. And people need
well,
to draw
I
from
honestly
you.
and sincerely, compared to a guy like, I'm developing a mind. What's it called? When the mind suddenly shuts down. I forget the word. But I can see him in my mind's eyes. He's passed on now. I used to call him, I still call him Moving Encyclopedia. He was in outside broadcast unit. And, oh dear, what happened to his name? He could give you a lecture on any area of broadcasting. His primary responsibility later was largely outside broadcasts. But he could teach any subject in broadcasting. And he was one of the very few sports commentators who could run commentary on any area of sports. Today, most of them are just football people.
Yes, but he's passed on. But
yes, Walter, that's it. That's it. Walter Batterway.
Yeah. We still have you, and we look forward to reading something from you. So is there something else you want to tell us? Something else we don't know about Phil Ushie? People are rooting for you here. And,
I don't know.
What do you want to tell us?
I love this profession. I would like to at least move it back where I found it, where I met it. And if possible, and that's my dream, move it up. Okay. It can be done.
Okay. Okay.
It can be done. Hopefully, when there's the right investor, meaning sensible investor who wants to do this thing properly, run this industry properly. Broadcasting is a practice. It's not a business. It's a practice. So who's willing to run the practice well? So he puts together the way someone who wants to operate a bank or run a bank or float a bank would first look for experienced bankers in headship positions.
All right, so you want the best for the profession. You want to say thank you for your time. It's not easy to track you where we had to track you.
No, Charlie knows he can always get me. Charlie, no, buddies like you would find me anytime. You've recovered my number, I assume, and so it's always my pleasure.
Thank you for your time.